Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through the articles, the research, all the notes, really to pull out the key nuggets for you. And today we're diving into August 18th, 2025. A really packed day for significant political moves. We've got some fascinating sources lined up. They paint, well, quite a vivid picture of a country grappling with some foundational issues. We're talking election mechanics, federal versus local power.
Yeah, a lot. Our goal today is to connect these dots, cut through the noise, and basically give you a shortcut to understanding these rapid shifts in U.S. politics.
Yeah, and what's really insightful, I think, is how these things that seem separate, a walkout in Texas, this huge defamation settlement, the voting method debates, they all kind of converge. They really shine a light on these fundamental questions about, well, democracy itself, accountability, that whole balance of power thing in the U.S. right now. So we won't just look at what happened, but try to get into why it matters to you.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack that first big story then, this major announcement about how future elections might actually be run. Right. So on August 18th, President Trump pledged he'd issue an executive order. The aim, to end mail-in ballots and voting machines before the 2026 midterms, which immediately raises this huge question about the nuts and bolts of our democracy and, frankly, who's in charge of them.
And his reasoning stated very clearly, forcefully even, on Truth Social. He said they're highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial. He's argued for a long time that they're vulnerable to fraud. Though, we should note, sources often describe the actual evidence of widespread fraud in the U.S. as, well, scant or even vanishingly rare. He's pushing for watermark paper instead, claims it's faster, and leaves, and I'm quoting here, no doubt as to who won and who lost.
And if we look at the bigger picture, the sort of constitutional angle, he also put forward this really controversial view on state authority, basically saying states are merely an agent for the federal government when it comes to counting votes, that they must do what the president tells them, for the good of our country. These statements, they really lay bare this growing tension, right? Federal power versus states' rights, playing out right where your vote gets counted.
And you can bet there's pushback. The ACLU, for instance, they immediately jumped in, said these attacks are part of his strategy to sow distrust and stop voters holding him accountable. They stressed that mail-in voting is, quote, a vital safeguard, especially for certain groups, like voters with disabilities, or maybe those without easy transportation.
And the DNC echoed that. Their spokesperson, Marcus W. Robinson, called the promise legally baseless, warned it threatens voting rights for millions of military families, overseas voters, you name it.
So the big question, legally speaking, does an executive order like this even hold water? What are the experts saying?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Legal scholars, people like Richard Briffault at Columbia, James Gardner at Buffalo, they point to a major constitutional hurdle. They argue election rules are fundamentally legislative. Congress makes those rules, not the president, via executive order. So this proposed order faces a massive uphill legal fight. It forces a confrontation over the separation of powers itself. And they also point out Congress itself has limits. It can't just regulate state and local elections unless it's enforcing specific constitutional amendments, like voting rights acts.
Okay, that's the legal theory. But here's something interesting. Given his really strong public stance against mail-in ballots, what about his own voting history?
Yes. That's a crucial piece of context, isn't it? Despite being very vocal against it.
Yeah.
The president himself has actually used mail-in ballots multiple times. Florida primaries in 2020, New York in 2018, 2017.
Right.
I remember the Swamp the Vote USA drive in 2024. That was his campaign encouraging postal ballots. Analysts at the time saw it as, well, a pragmatic move, an acceptance that, hey, a lot of his own supporters use this method.
Interesting. And he also claimed the U.S. is the only country doing this. How does that stack up against the facts?
Yeah, that's just not accurate. The international IDA data, it's pretty clear. It shows 34 countries around the world allow in-country postal voting. We're talking Germany, the UK, Denmark, Canada. Now, some have restrictions, sure, but the U.S. isn't alone.
Not even close. And he even brought Russia into it, claiming Putin agreed with him.
He did. Quoted Putin supposedly saying, your election was rigged because you have mail-in voting. No country has mail-in voting, which, again, is factually wrong on the second part.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, this whole discussion, it just highlights these fierce legal and political fights that are coming, fights about how we vote. And that directly impacts your ability to vote and have that vote counted reliably. It's really a fundamental clash over who controls the process.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Moving from how we vote to how votes are weighted, you could say, through district lines. Let's talk redistricting, specifically in Texas. Big news today. The Texas House finally got a quorum. First time in 2 weeks.
That's right. It came after that walkout by state Democrats. They were protesting what they called a gerrymandered congressional map, basically one drawn by Republicans to strongly favor Republicans. The House Speaker, Dustin Burrows, a Republican, he basically said, "We're done waiting. We have a quorum. Time for action." He even added this pretty striking detail about the members who had civil arrest warrants. Said they could only leave if they agreed to have a state trooper escort to guarantee they'd come back.
Wow. Okay, so quorum achieved. What does that mean practically? Does this map just sail through now, and how big a deal is this nationally?
Achieving quorum is the key step, yeah. It means they have enough members present to actually legislate.
Yeah.
So it really does pave the way for this new map to pass in Texas. And if it does, the projections are the GOP could pick up 5 extra U.S. House seats. That's a pretty significant shift in the balance of power back in Washington, D.C.
5 seats. Okay. And this isn't happening in a vacuum, is it? California seems to be making a move, too.
Exactly. It's like a counterpunch. California's Governor Newsom is pushing their own redistricting plan. It's actually up for consideration today. It includes things like a special election in November, approving a new map there, and it seems specifically designed to offset the Texas map. The goal in California, give Democrats their 5 more seats. So it's a perfect illustration of this nationwide redistricting battle. States actively jockeying for federal power, redrawing lines to shape Congress.
A real high-stakes game of political chess playing out state by state. Okay, let's pivot again. From the rules and the maps to the consequences of information or maybe misinformation about elections. There was a major financial settlement announced today.
Yeah, this is significant. Newsmax, the conservative media outlet, agreed to pay Dominion Voting Systems $67 million. That settles a defamation lawsuit Dominion brought against them over false claims Newsmax aired about the 2020 election. What this really underscores, I think, is the increasing financial accountability for information platforms. There are real costs involved.
And this wasn't out of the blue, right? The case was heading to trial, and a judge had already ruled Newsmax had defamed Dominion.
Correct. And remember, this follows that massive $787.5 million settlement Dominion got from Fox News just last year.
Right, huge numbers. And wasn't there also a settlement with Smartmatic?
Yes, Newsmax settled with Smartmatic too, another voting tech company, reportedly for $40 million. And One America News also settled with Smartmatic previously.
So it's a clear trend. What was Newsmax's public reason for settling now?
Well, they stated they settled not because they admitted wrongdoing, but they claimed they didn't believe the judge would give them a fair trial. Dominion, on the other hand, said they were pleased with the settlement. But regardless of the stated reasons, the outcome highlights these very real, very substantial financial and legal risks. If you make unsubstantiated claims about election integrity, well, it can cost you a lot. It's a tangible cost of misinformation shaping public discourse.
Okay, moving beyond things directly tied to the ballot box, but still seeing these themes of federal power, accountability. Let's look at Washington, D.C. There's a federal crackdown happening.
Yes. Today, Mississippi's governor, Tate Reeves, he approved sending about 200 Mississippi National Guard troops to D.C. It's part of a Trump administration push to overhaul policing in the Capitol. The stated goal is return law and order, combat what they call out-of-control crime. But this action, it immediately brings up these fundamental questions about federal reach into local affairs, especially in D.C., which has its own unique governance structure.
And the reaction from D.C. officials has been anything but welcoming, right?
Extremely strong pushback. Mayor Muriel Bowser, she posted on X, Twitter, "American soldiers and airmen policing American citizens on American soil is #un-American." Pretty blunt.
Very blunt. And wasn't there a lawsuit, too?
Yes. The D.C. Attorney General filed suit, alleged a hostile takeover of the city's police, especially after a federal administrator was briefly named Emergency Police Commissioner. Now, the Justice Department did eventually agree to keep the local police chief in charge, but Mayor Bowser still called the whole thing unsettling and unprecedented and an authoritarian push.
It really throws that tension between federal power and local autonomy into sharp relief, particularly in the Capitol.
Absolutely. D.C.'s unique status, where Congress has ultimate authority, means these federal actions can directly challenge the city's ability to govern itself. It's a real constitutional flashpoint.
Okay, now let's shift to the international stage for a moment. A significant visit to the White House today.
Yes, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was back in Washington. High-stakes talks with President Trump, but also key European allies were there. Leaders from NATO, the European Commission, the UK, Italy, France, Germany, Finland. A major gathering.
And what was on the table? Sounds like some very sensitive discussions.
Definitely. President Trump, interestingly, didn't rule out future security guarantees in the form of U.S. troops. He reiterated, it's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that.
And Zelensky, was he pushed on the idea of giving up territory, redrawing maps?
He was asked directly if he's prepared to redraw the maps, which is diplomatic code for ceding territory to Russia. His response emphasized Russia's ongoing attacks, the need to stop the war diplomatically. But significantly, according to reports, he didn't completely shut the door on the concept. It just shows the incredibly difficult balancing act happening right now. Military reality, diplomatic pressure, and the core issue of territorial integrity.
A very complex situation. Okay, one last piece for today. Back to domestic issues, but with international and environmental dimensions. A legal fight over an immigration facility in Florida.
That's right. Nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz, apparently. The ACLU has filed a lawsuit. They're alleging serious human rights abuses against detainees at this remote immigration jail. Things like denial of due process before deportation.
Human rights abuses. And isn't there another lawsuit against the same facility?
Yes, that's what makes it particularly complex. A separate case brought by environmental groups in a Native American tribe. They claim the jail itself has caused irreversible damage to fragile wetlands in the area.
So it's being challenged on two very different fronts: human rights and environmental protection.
Exactly. And there's some movement. A federal judge is expected to rule on the environmental case this week. And earlier this month, that same judge issued a temporary restraining order stopping new construction, though the facility is still operating with about 700 detainees. It really highlights how multifaceted immigration policy challenges are. Human rights, environmental impact, legal processes, all intersecting at this one remote facility.
What a day. Just listening back. The mechanics of voting, redrawing power through maps, the huge cost of misinformation, federal power flexing domestically, major international diplomacy, human rights, and environmental clashes. It's all connected.
It really is. All these events just from August 18th, they paint such a vivid picture of how dynamic and, often contentious U.S. politics are right now. It shows how quickly norms get challenged, how fast legal and political battles ignite on so many fronts at once. It's like a snapshot of a system under considerable stress, constantly shifting.
It is a lot to absorb, definitely. But hopefully by connecting these dots, you get a better handle on those bigger forces shaping things, that aha moment maybe.
So thinking about all this, the legal fights, the policy shifts we've just unpacked, from ballots to borders, what does it all mean for you, really? Here's something to chew on. Given everything we've discussed today, how might these ongoing battles over election rules, federal authority, even information itself, how might they fundamentally redefine the balance of power between states and the federal government in the coming years, not just in elections, but across the board?
A big question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging for those insights.